Montana Territory. November 1881. Nobody noticed what was happening in that shelter. While every cabin within 50 miles fought the same battle, splitting cord of firewood, choking on smoke, watching frost creep across floorboards, one man had already left that fight behind. From the outside, his dwelling looked like a simple dugout carved into the hillside, unremarkable, almost primitive. Inside, it was another reality entirely. The air stayed warm without the constant feeding of flames. Children played on the floor in light, clothing while blizzards raged outside. No smoke, no frozen mornings, no desperate midnight runs to the woodpile. He didn't build it to prove a point. He built it because he understood something the territory had forgotten or maybe never learned. The earth itself was the answer, not the enemy. Today, you're going to see exactly how he did it, why everyone thought he was wasting his time, and the moment an entire valley realized they'd been doing it wrong all along. But here's what I need from you. Hit that subscribe button right now, because every week I bring you one technique that actually worked when survival wasn't optional. It was the only option. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know how cold it gets where you are, because what you're about to learn works from Alberta to the Appalachians. The numbers don't lie. 87 degrees. All winter. Almost no firewood. Let me show you how. William Crane wasn't special. He worked a small timber claim in the Bitterroot Range, 12 miles from the nearest settlement. 42 years old. Widower. 2 young daughters, Emma 9 and Sarah 6. 3 winters in Montana had taught him exactly one lesson. You either spent half your life gathering firewood or you froze. Every autumn, the same routine. 6 cords of split pine stacked against the north wall of his cabin. Another 4 cords under canvas. Birch bark bundled in the rafters. Kindling sorted by size. And still, by February, he'd be rationing. The girls would wait with frost on their blankets. Ice inside the water bucket. Mornings meant coaxing life back into coals that had died overnight. Breathing smoke until flu finally drew. It wasn't the cold that broke him. It was the work. September 1881. William spent 4 days hauling deadfall from a ridge 2 miles upslope. On the 5th day, his shoulder gave out, old injury from a falling branch 3 years prior. He couldn't lift the axe overhead, couldn't swing the maul. The woodpile sat half-finished, and the cottonwoods were already losing their leaves. Emma watched him try to split around one-handed, watched him fail. She didn't say anything. She was 9. She understood what winter meant. That night, William sat outside the cabin and did something he rarely allowed himself. He thought past survival. There had to be another way. Not a better axe. Not a stronger back. A different system entirely. He'd spent the summer surveying a mining claim near Phillipsburg. The old prospector's tunnel, 40 feet deep into the hillside, had stayed cool in July. Not cold. Cool. Stable. The man kept his butter and milk there, wrapped in cloth. In August, when the air outside hit 92 degrees, the tunnel held at 55. William thought about that for 3 hours. By midnight, he'd made his decision. He wasn't going to fight winter anymore. He was going to disappear into the hill. October 1881. William chose a south-facing slope half a mile from his timber claim. Gentle grade, good drainage, clay-rich soil over fractured shale. He started digging. Not a root cellar, not a dugout for storage. A home. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. He would excavate a chamber 12 feet wide, 16 feet deep, and 8 feet tall, entirely below the frost line. The front wall would be vertical, built from stacked stone and log framing, with a single heavy door and 1 small window for light. The other 3 walls and the ceiling would be raw earth, supported by a timber framework and sealed with a mixture of clay, straw, and river sand. The entrance was critical. William dug a descending tunnel, 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, angled downward at 15 degrees. This created an airlock. Cold air is heavy. It sinks. The tunnel trapped frigid air before it reached the living chamber, and warm air, being lighter, stayed inside where it belonged. He worked alone for 5 weeks. No one helped. No one asked what he was building. Neighbors saw the excavation, and assumed he was chasing a silver vein. Let them think that. By mid-November, the main chamber was complete. Timber ribs arched overhead, lashed together with rawhide and iron nails salvaged from an abandoned claim. He packed the ceiling with 8 inches of clay, then covered it with 2 feet of sod and stone. The weight was immense, easily 4,000 pounds, but the earth itself provided compression strength. The hill wasn't fighting the structure. It was becoming the structure. Inside, William installed a small firebox made from river stones, just large enough to burn 3 split logs at a time. The chimney ran up through the earthen ceiling in a clay-lined shaft, venting 15 feet above ground level to ensure proper draft. But here's what mattered. He wasn't relying on the fire for primary heat. He was relying on the earth. 6 feet below the surface, soil temperature in Montana holds steady between 50 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It doesn't freeze in winter. It doesn't bake in summer. It's a thermal battery, charged by the planet's core and insulated by the ground itself. William's chamber sat entirely within that zone. The math was brutal in its simplicity. A conventional log cabin at 20 degrees outside might hold 50 degrees inside without fire, if you're lucky. William's shelter started at 52 degrees with 0 input. Add body heat from 3 people, a small cook fire twice a day, and 1 oil lamp, and the temperature climbed to 70. Add a modest fire in the evenings, 2 logs, burned slowly, and it pushed past 85. The earth didn't steal heat. It stored it. It gave it back. He moved his daughters in on November 18th. First snow came that night. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens next is exactly why the old-timer survived when everyone else didn't. Hit that like button if you're already seeing where this is going. Nobody cared. That was the strangest part. William had expected questions, maybe even resistance. What he got was dismissal. Garrett Hess, the nearest neighbor, 3 miles downridge, rode past in late November and saw smoke rising from a hillside. He stopped, stared, then shook his head and kept riding. 2 days later, his wife mentioned it to the postmaster in Stevensville. Crane's living in a hole now, gone strange since Helen Pass. The postmaster shrugged. Man's business is his own. At the trading post, the reaction was worse. William came in to buy lamp oil and cornmeal, and the clerk, a young man named Pruitt, grinned at the woman beside him. Heard you're living like a prairie dog now, Crane. The woman laughed. Not cruel, just easy, thoughtless. William didn't respond. He paid and left, but the talk circulated. By December, half the valley had heard some version of it. Crane's gone soft, built himself a burrow, hiding from winter instead of facing it. Samuel Farrow, an experienced carpenter who'd built 14 cabins in the Bitterroots, heard the story third hand and delivered his verdict at the Sunday service. A man should live above ground. That's what separates us from animals. Winter's meant to be hard. It makes you strong. A few people nodded. Most just didn't care. There was one voice of concern, though it wasn't born from respect. It was born from worry. Abigail Farrow, Samuel's wife, pulled William aside after the service. What if it collapses? She asked quietly. What if the rains come in spring and the whole hill slides down on you and those girls? William met her eyes. She wasn't mocking him. She was genuinely afraid for Emma and Sarah. The structure's sound, he said. Timber framework, clay seal, the weights distributed across the ribs. She nodded slowly, but he could see she didn't understand, didn't believe. Just be careful, she said. He thanked her and walked back to the hillside. That was the extent of the opposition. No one tried to stop him. No one argued engineering principles. They just wrote him off as eccentric, grief-touched, foolish, a man who'd chosen the coward's path. Winter would prove who was right. December 14th, 1881. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, not with warning. It fell like a stone into black water. By dawn on the 15th, the valley was locked at 18 degrees below zero. By nightfall, it hit negative 26. The wind came down from the Cabinet Mountains with a sound like tearing canvas, and it didn't stop for 11 days. Garrett Hess burned through half his wood pile in the first week. His cabin, well-built, chinked with oakum and clay, held at 47 degrees inside when the fire roared. When it died down overnight, ice formed on the interior walls. His children slept in layers, with union suits, 2 blankets, a buffalo robe on top. They still woke shivering. Samuel Farrow's family fared worse. His cabin sat on higher ground, more exposed. He split wood every morning until his hands bled, fed the stove every 2 hours, and still couldn't break 52 degrees. The baby developed a cough that wouldn't quit. His wife boiled water day and night just to keep moisture in the air, and the windows ran with condensation that froze into intricate lacework by midnight. Across the valley, it was the same. Families rationing firewood, smoke pouring from every chimney. Men venturing out into the wind to retrieve frozen logs, coming back with frostbite on their ears and fingers. On December 19th, Garrett's oldest son walked to Farrow Place to borrow an axe. He passed William Crane's hillside and stopped. No smoke. The chimney vented a thin, lazy ribbon of heat, barely visible. Nothing like the thick columns pouring from every other homestead. The boy stood there in the wind, confused. Then he kept walking. On December 22nd, the temperature hit -30. Abigail Farrow's sister, living 4 miles south, showed up at their door with her 2 children, begging for shelter. Their cabin had become unlivable. The fire consumed wood faster than her husband could split it, and the cold still poured through gaps in the chinking like water through a sieve. Samuel took them in. Now there were 9 people in a cabin built for 5, and the firewood was disappearing. By Christmas Eve, people were burning furniture. And still, from William Crane's hillside, almost no smoke. Garrett Hess finally rode over on December 26th. He didn't want to. Pride fought with curiosity for 2 days, and curiosity won. He knocked on the stone-end timber face built into the hill. The heavy door opened. Warm air rolled out like a living thing. Garrett froze. What in God's name? William stood there in shirt sleeves. Behind him, Emma and Sarah sat on a rug, playing with carved wooden animals. No heavy coats. No blankets wrapped around their shoulders. The air inside wasn't just warm, it was comfortable. Garrett's breath caught. How? William stepped aside. Come see. Stay with me, because what Garrett saw in the next 60 seconds changed the valley forever. Subscribe right now if you want to know how many degrees warmer it actually was, because the number humiliated every expert in the territory. Garrett stood in the entrance tunnel and felt it immediately. The cold stopped following him. The tunnel descended 6 feet into the hillside, angled downward, and the temperature climbed with every step. Outside, -28 degrees. Halfway down the tunnel, 10 degrees. At the door to the main chamber, 45. He stepped inside. 87 degrees. He stared at the small thermometer hanging from a timber beam, a mercury instrument William had purchased 2 years prior for tracking barn temperatures. The silver line sat just above the 87-degree mark, unwavering. Outside, the wind shrieked at 30 below. Inside, Sarah was barefoot. How much were you burning? Garrett's voice came out hoarse. William gestured to the firebox in the corner. It was small, maybe 18 inches across, built from river stones with a clay liner. 3 logs this morning. 2 tonight. That's it. Garrett did the math in his head. 6 logs a day. He was burning 40. It doesn't make sense, Garrett said. It makes perfect sense. William motioned to the walls. Touch it. Garrett placed his palm against the clay-packed earth. It was warm. Not hot. Warm. Like a blanket that had been sitting in the sun. The ground 6 feet down holds at 52 degrees year-round, William explained. Doesn't freeze. Doesn't matter what the air does. The Earth's a battery. It stores heat from summer, releases it in winter. I'm not fighting the cold. I'm letting the ground do the work. He pointed to the ceiling. 2 feet of sod and stone above us. For 1,000 pounds of thermal mass. During the day, the fire in our body heat warm the air. That heat moves into the earth, into the walls, the ceiling. At night, when the fire dies, the earth gives it back. Slow, steady, all night long. Garrett turned in a slow circle. The chamber was 12 feet wide, 16 deep. Timber ribs overhead, lashed and braced, a small table, 2 beds built into alcoves carved into back wall, shelves holding jars of preserves, a cast iron pot hanging over firebox. It wasn't primitive. It was elegant. The tunnel, William continued, traps the cold air. Cold sinks. It's heavier than warm air. So it settles in the tunnel and stays there. Warm air rises, stays in the chamber. I don't lose heat every time I open the door because the cold can't climb uphill. Garrett exhaled slowly. His breath didn't fog. That's when it hit him. His cabin, at 47 degrees, still showed his breath. This room, at 87, didn't. You're telling me you're 40 degrees warmer than my place, using a tenth of the firewood. Closer to 15th, William said quietly. Garrett left 20 minutes later. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. By December 28th, 5 men had visited William's shelter. By New Year's Day, it was 12. They all asked the same questions. How deep? How much timber? What about water seepage? What about ventilation? Does the smoke draw properly? William answered everyone. He wasn't selling anything. He wasn't preaching. He was just showing them what worked. On January 3rd, 1882, the cold finally broke. The temperature climbed to 15 degrees, practically warm, and the wind died. Across the valley, families emerged from their cabins, haggard and exhausted. Garrett Hess had burned 11 cords of wood in 3 weeks. William Crane had burned less than 1. The difference wasn't close. It was absolute. And it wasn't just a firewood. It was the sleep, the health, the fact that William's daughters never developed the coughs and chills that plagued every other child in the valley. It was the mornings without frost, the evenings without smoke, the deep animal comfort of warmth that didn't require constant vigilance. Abigail Farrow, who'd worried the hill would collapse, came by in mid-January with her husband. She stood inside the chamber for 10 minutes without speaking. Then she looked at William and said, very quietly, "You weren't being reckless. You were being smart." Samuel nodded. Once. That was all. By February, the valley had a new nickname for William's shelter. They called it the Warren, not as an insult, as a compliment. Because when the cold came, the rabbit survived. Spring came late in 1882. The snow lingered until April, and the melt turned every creek into a torrent. But by May, the valley was moving again. And quietly, without announcement or fanfare, it was changing. Garrett Hess dug into the south slope behind his cabin. Not a full dwelling, not yet, just a root cellar, expanded and deepened, 8 feet down. Timber framed, clay sealed. He stored potatoes and carrots there, but he also built a small bench inside and a ventilation shaft. When the next winter came, his children would sleep there on the coldest nights. Samuel Farrow didn't dig, but he moved. In June, he began construction on a new cabin, built partially into a hillside, with the back wall set 4 feet into the earth. The front faced south. The rear stayed buried. He didn't call it an earth shelter. He called it good sense. By autumn, 3 more families had started similar projects. Not copies, variations, adaptations. One man dug a tunnel connecting his cabin to a hillside chamber, using it as a winter room. Another built a stone inside addition onto his existing structure, insulated by 2 feet of earth. No one made speeches. No one credited William. They just did it. The technique spread the way useful things always spread. Quietly, neighbor to neighbor, winter to winter. A farmer visiting family in Phillipsburg mentioned it. A trapper passing to Missoula described it to a boarding house owner. A letter sent east to a brother in Wisconsin included a sketch and measurements. By 1885, 42 earth-sheltered dwellings or winter rooms had been built within a 100-mile radius of Stevensville. Some failed. Poor drainage, weak framing, inadequate ventilation. But most worked, and the ones that worked saved lives. William Crane never promoted his design. He didn't write articles or give lectures. He just lived in his hillside shelter with his daughters, burning a 15th of firewood his neighbors required, staying warm when the valley froze. In 1887, a land surveyor from the General Land Office visited the area and noted in his field journal, "Observe an increasing trend of earth-integrated construction among settlers. Structures demonstrate significant thermal efficiency compared to conventional log cabins. Technique appears to be of local origin, adapted from root cellar principles. Local origin, not imported from the East, not taught by engineers, born from necessity, proven by crisis, spread by results." By 1890, the Valley didn't think of Earth shelters as strange anymore. They thought of them as normal. The oddity wasn't the man living in the hill. It was a man who refused to learn from him. William's daughters grew up warm. Emma married a schoolteacher. In 1891, Sarah became a midwife. They both built homes with their husbands, conventional homes, above ground, with floors and glass windows. But each one had a back room dug into the slope, just in case, because they remembered. They remembered the winter of 1881, when their father had been called foolish, when neighbors burned furniture and children coughed through frozen nights, when survival meant work without end. And they remembered the warmth, the silence, the way the earth held them. That's the lesson, isn't it? The frontier didn't care about pride. It didn't reward stubbornness. It rewarded what worked. And what worked wasn't always what looked right or sounded right or fit the expectations of men who thought they knew better. William Crane understood something the territory had forgotten. The earth isn't the enemy. It's the answer. Not because it's easy. It's not. Digging into a hillside is brutal work, but because it's effective, because it turns winter from a fight into a fact. Manageable, survivable, 87 degrees, all winter, almost no firewood, not a miracle, just math, just physics, just a man who stopped fighting the cold and started working with the ground. The old wisdom isn't old because it's outdated. It's old because it worked long enough to survive. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what's the coldest winter you've ever faced. Have you ever thought about building something like this? Could you see yourself digging into a hillside to cut your heating bill to almost nothing? Hit that subscribe button if you want more of these forgotten techniques. Because every week, I'm bringing you something real. Something that worked when failure meant freezing. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who'd survive the frontier. See you in the next one.